It's a beautiful Thursday morning. Welcome to the Daily here on Echo Television International, where I'll be taking newspaper reviews on the current happenings in Nigeria. I am your host, Rachel Tanze, and we will be live on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to follow us there. And the first paper I will be starting with is the This Day newspaper. And the first story on the paper: Senate backs CBN on Naira redesign after rowdy session. And the writer following that story wants extension of deadline to April 30 to allow lawmakers afloat cash for election. There is a report on average remuneration of Nigerian CEOs dropped to 333.49 million naira in 2021, and you can find that story on page 5. I can't Islamize Nigeria if I couldn't Islamize my home. This is a statement from Bola Tinubu. He says those opposed to Shettima lobbied to be VP but were rejected. Can insist on secular state meets APC presidential hopeful. Ex-Lagos governor meets private stakeholders today in Imo. And if you find that story interesting, you can continue on page 10. And the big story on This Day newspaper: Atiku at NGE Forum vows to continue Obasanjo's economic policies. The writer says restate desire to privatize ailing government enterprises, says nation needs healing, vows to form government of national unity, reiterates support for resource control, upbeat about reconciling with Wike-led group. And you can continue with that story on page 10. Nigeria's insecurity is result in withering poverty. This is coming from Okowa, and you can read more of what he has to say on page 38. There is a picture story of Glow Festival of Joy landlord yesterday. And that's all the news on This Day newspaper. And I will be moving to our next paper, which is the Daily Times newspaper. Still on 2023, no going back on restructuring. This is coming from Atiku, the PDP presidential candidate. And you can continue what he is saying about restructuring on page 2. And the big story on the Daily Times: I will hand over Nigeria free of insecurity. This is coming from our president, Muhammadu Buhari. And the writer says approves 134 billion naira for military veterans security debarment allowance, and donates 10 million at launch of emblem appeal of 2023 Armed Forces Remembrance Day. You can continue with that story on page 3. And our hope as Nigerians is that as this money is being approved, 134 billion naira for military veterans, we hope that they get it, because often the situation in our country is that such monies are released and nobody gets to see it. They fight for it, and nobody gets to see it. So I hope whoever is in charge and responsible for this money to get to the right person will be accountable, will be corruption free, and will do the right thing, so that our veterans will have some kind of allowance and they will be proud to say they served Nigeria as a country, and the government have been able to recognize their effort in service to the nation. Still on the Daily Times newspaper: Tinubu meets with Khan, allies same fate ticket fears. And you can continue with that story on page 2. And at the downside of the paper: sanction MDAs that violate principles. Federal government tells Federal Character Commission. You can read that on page 3. FEC okays over 10.96 billion naira for contract in Education Ministry FRSC vehicles. That story can be found on page 2 of the Daily Times newspaper. Senate approves CBN's Naira note redesign policy. Half salary, lecturers received pay for work done. This is coming from Adamu, and you can read that on page 4. And we remember that for some days now, there has been campaign and protest against the no work, no pay salary for our lecturers by ASU. And we saw pictures where students joined in this campaign and then protest. We hope something is being done, that our lecturers are being paid and of course are treated as good citizens of this country, because they are trying and they are responsible for the future leaders of tomorrow. If we have half-baked students graduating from school, it means that we have half-baked lecturers. It means that we have lecturers who feel neglected and therefore feel there's no need for them to put in their effort in nation building. So I hope that something is being done about this and let their pay be given to them. And we will be moving, and I will be moving to the next paper, which is Nigerian Tribune. Ohaneze Indibo insists on OB. You can find that on page 2. Rowdy session as Senate gives CBN nod to redesign Naira. Wike apologizes to Ashemole for supporting Obaseki's re-election. And you can read that story on page 3. Tinubu to Khan, my administration will be blind to religious affiliation. You can read that on page 4. And we hope he is true to his word. The big story on Nigerian Tribune: no going back on no work, no pay for lecturers. This is coming from our federal government. Says government paid what is due to them. Some presidential candidate planning to privatize federal universities. This is a statement coming from the ASU president. Dialogue key to conflict resolution. This is coming from the Sultan. And you can read all of that on page 8. Drunk soldier kills general while driving in Lagos barrack. What a sad story. And please make sure that your driver is not an alcoholic before you hire whoever it is, that person that you plan on entrusting your life with. And you can read more of that story on page 29. Still on Lagos Ibadan Expressway, Oyo governor engages hunters, vigilante groups, and business owners. And you can read that on page 9. Gunmen kill 9 family members, 2 others in Plateau community. And you can read that on page 28. What a sad story. And we pray for comfort for this community. UK channels $100 million to women-owned business in Nigeria. And you can read that story on page 6. Still on Nigerian Tribune, Atiku says my restructuring agenda starts from first day in office. Blueprint ready. Promises to form government of national unity. Molds massive employment into police armed forces. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune. Moving to the next paper, which is the leadership newspaper. Ayu boost PDP will win Lagos and 24 other states. Naira redesign may crash dollar to 200 naira. This is coming from the EFCC chairman. And as a Nigerian citizen, I will say I'm looking forward to that. And I hope you are also looking forward to that. It will be very exciting to wake up one day that our Naira is 200 per dollar. There was once a time way back 2000 and early 2011, 12, there about 13, that our dollar was 160. And for it to go back to 200 Naira, it will be a great achievement, and it will completely solve the issue of inflation. Because when you go to the market and traders are complaining, the number one factor behind why the dollar, why foodstuffs are expensive in the market is because of the dollar rate. And if this can happen come whatever year, 1 year from now, 2 years, 3 years, then it will be a win-win for our economy and our government, because it means that we have tackled the issue of economy, and no businessman, no trader, you won't go to buy food and somebody will tell you it is because of dollar, but no, inflation will be tackled. Still on leadership newspaper, the big story, Muslim ticket. Khan softens stance, presents demand to Tinubu. You can read that on page 4. There's a writer that follows the big story, and it says, want equal rights for all religions. self-actualization for all ethnic groups, says no to open grazing. I will form government of national unity. This is coming from Atiku. And at the right side of the paper, East-West Road Communities commend MDDC. Wike to Ashomole, I'm sorry for supporting Obaseki's re-election. No pay, no work, no pay policy has come to stay, federal government tells ASU. Still on the leadership newspaper, there is a picture story that we can see our vice president being decorated, and there is the president with him. If you want to know more of that story and what it is all about, you can get the leadership newspaper for yourself. And that's all the news on leadership. Moving on to the next paper, which is New Telegraph. And the first story there, CBN may devalue Naira steeply after 2023 election. You can continue with that on page 3. Federal government spends 612.5 billion Naira bond proceed on 2,820 kilometer roads. And you can find that story on 28. And I would like to say this to the federal government. It is a very good thing that we are constructing roads. But one thing I notice is that we forget about road maintenance. And there's nothing good that shouldn't be maintained, no matter how good a product is, no matter how well constructed a road is. There should be plans for maintenance. And negligence is the reason why we leave our roads to become extremely bad. Very, very bad, to the extent that it's damaged completely and there's no need for maintenance but a reconstruction, and that will cost us more money. So as we are building these roads, let's have budgets, let's have plans for maintenance. Let the body responsible for the maintenance of this road be up and doing, and make sure that the pothole, because a pothole usually starts very tiny, and once nothing is done about it, it just keeps expanding and expanding. And before you know it, a road is completely damaged because there is no maintenance. Not because the government didn't construct road, but because there was no maintenance of the road. So please, let there be maintenance also. It is a good thing that we're building roads, but every good thing can spoil as long as it is not being taken care of. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, uproar in Senate over Naira redesign. You can find that story on page 3 and 26. Power loop sickness, withering poverty, fueling insecurity. This is coming from Okowa. Eze Kome calls for immediate release of Kanu. INEC to Nigerians, clear 2023 voters registration. You can read that on page 4 and 5. And the big story on New Telegraph is still on 2023 election. Political dynasty gear for battle as emerging established power blocks aim for relevance. Politics governance turn to family affairs. De-emphasize rallies in Kerry tells parties, and that can be found on page 4, 9, and 10. Still on the New Telegraph newspaper, Tinubu assures Khan, I've never, won't run my administration on religious bias. APC presidential candidate Sanwo-Olu, Lagos Assembly mourn Olawole's death. That can be found on page 4 and 28. Close ranks, get your PVCs, Ohaneze tells Indibo, and you can find that story on page 2. Laments funding gap, still on our 2023 election. Still on flooding, NEMA neglected worst affected states reps. We've provided 12,000 metric tons of grain to 36 states. This is coming from the Director General of NEMA. Senate urges federal government to release 500 billion naira from service-wide vote for road rehabilitation. And you can read that on page 4 and 26. Still on New Telegraph, ASU, face of linger as federal government insists on no work, no pay. This is coming from ASU. FEC approves 8.3 billion for education ministry. okays 2.57 billion naira for purchase of vehicles for FRSC. National Labour Advisory Council disagrees with union over Ingige. Uniben chapter accuses federal government of abdicating responsibility of providing education to Nigerians. And you can read all of that on pages 2, 26, and 29. Article plots blueprint to bridge poverty gap, implement Oransaye report. Always favors over G5 governors stance. G5 governors won't just equity, fairness, justice. Wiki apologizes to Ohamide over past remarks, and that can be found on page 3 and 5. And on the downside of New Telegraph paper, there is a study that says loud music, earbuds may increase the risk of hearing loss. And for our young youths that we are always wearing our earpiece, please be careful. Don't be too addicted to our AirPods. Don't sleep with it. Remove it and let your music not be too loud. Let the movie you're watching, whatever it is that you do with your earpiece, let it not be too loud, as there is a study showing that you can risk hearing loss as you grow. You can find that story on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph. And I'll be moving on to the next paper, which is the Daily Independent. And the first story there, our people don't feel your impact. Rep Slam Nema Director General accuses agency of lopsidedness in intervention. And you can read that on page 7. We are not consulting deities against Soludo over comment of Obi. This is coming from Ohaneze. And the big story on Daily Independent is on half salaries. We won't pay ASU members for work not done. Federal government insists, and you can read that on page 29. Naira may devalued after 2023 elections. And if you want to know why, you can find that on page 29 of Daily Independent. Drunk soldier crashes general to death in barracks. Rowdy session in Senate over Naira redesign. No going back on restructuring. This is coming from Atiku, says he will set in motion realization of the agenda from day one. And you can read that on page 6. Troops kill bandit leader Kachala Godo in Kaduna, and you can read that on page 7. And I would like to say this is the type of report that as Nigerians we are looking forward to see. We need to know that our Nigerian forces are working, and they are not sleeping on the issue of terrorism, but that they are working day and night endlessly to see that terrorists are being called to book, that terrorism is being caught, and that one day we will wake up to a very secure Nigeria where the issues of terrorism is long gone, unknown gunmen is a history, bandit, kidnappers, terrorists, Boko Haram will be true history, that we will no longer be faced with such fears. And kudos to our troops for doing their job, and God bless you and continue to give you the strength to do more of your work. Still on Daily Independent, use of BVA's e-transmission of results irreversible. INEC reassures Nigerians, and you can read that on page 23. And at the downside of the paper, which is the last news on Daily Independent, FEC okays vehicles for FRSC at 2.578 billion naira. And that's all the news on Daily Independent. And I'll be moving to the next paper, which is the Business Day newspaper, starting with the big story. Nigeria misses millions of dollars on failed LNG projects. You can continue with that story on page 30. Spare parts, cost of foreign exchange crisis, ground planes. That story can be found on page 30. UTM Offshore Inc.'s contract for Nigeria first floating LNG project. Why I am exposing Tinubu. This is coming from Hyundai, and you can turn to that story on page 2. And that's all the news on Business Day. The next paper I'll be taking is the First News newspaper. Fresh ASUU strike looms as federal government insists on not paying for work not done. Obasanjo meets Yoruba elders, endorses devolution of power. Forgive me for ensuring Obaseki's re-election, Wike begs Ashemule. Naira redesign throws Senate into commotion as lawmakers approve CBN's plan after heated debate. Atiku slams Buhari over lopsided appointment, says 17 heads of security agencies are northerners. And as you are slamming the president, we are looking forward to how you will go about it when you become the president. And this is for every presidential candidate. We want to see who will be your ministers. We want to see if you'll be fair and true in who you appoint to be your ministers, if you'll be biased, or if you will really pull on democracy, and that's why we voted you in the first place, so that there will be balance in our government. So as Atiku is slamming Buhari, we are looking forward to see how he will go about his ministerial appointment when he becomes the president. And I believe this we can see also for Tinubu, the All Progressive Congress aspirant, and also for Peter Obi. Still on the First News newspaper, Muslim ticket, Tinubu moves to placate Khan, meets with leadership. Ghana issues travel advisory, warns citizens against visiting Abuja. And then the big story is a tragic. Soldier kills army general with SUV inside Lagos barrack. Deceased was until his death. NAFRC Director of Finance. Sources says drunk corporal knocked down general walking home inside barrack on Tuesday night. Drama as Oni of Ife drags ex-queen Naomi's brother to court. I will return to Nigeria soon. It's time to actualize Yoruba nation. This is coming from Sunday Igboho. And at the downside of the paper, presidency, why we met with Tinubu. This is coming from Khan and still about the 2023 presidential election. Dollar may crash to 200 Naira EFCC chair. And then no going back on use of BVC. And I keep assuring us FIRS opens 25 new satellite tax offices across Nigeria. Tears as Lagos lawmaker who died at APC Just rally is buried. FIRS opens 25 new satellite tax offices across Nigeria. Man United remove Ronaldo's post from Old Trafford. And that's all the news on First News newspaper. And I'll be moving to the next paper, which is the Nation newspaper. World Bank okays $13.5 million financing plan for Nigeria. Buhari approves $134.7 billion for military veterans. Tribunal compels INEC to release Adeleke's certificate. You can find that story on page 7. UK government launches $100 million scheme to lift women. And you can read that on page 9. Drunk soldier kills general in Lagos, and UK urged to intervene in Kanu's trial. And the big story on the Nation newspaper, I'm not seeking office on religious ground. This is coming from Tinubu. The writer says APC presidential candidate meets Khan, Christian body presents charter of demands, and you can continue with that story on page 4. And there is a picture story, there is a picture story supporting the big story. Federal government insists on no work, no pay for ASUU members. Rivers won't vote for president along party line, says Wike, and you can continue with that story on page 5. Security operatives take over Ekiti Assembly. Court rejects Maynard's bail application. You can read that on page 6. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper. And I'll be moving to the next paper, which is the Punch newspaper. Federal government and ASUU begin fresh showdown of minister tackles lecturers. Naira redesign targets looted funds. This is coming from the EFCC chair. And I would like them to give us a report, like let us be updated of how far and how much so far has been gotten concerning this looted fund, because some weeks back when this started, there was somebody who was on the news, I think a lawmaker or somebody from the Senate or a honorable from Kogi State, who was caught with a huge sum of money and dollars when this whole thing started. We would like to see more progress report on how many people have been found, one thing, trying to deposit this looted money in the bank, as one of the reasons is to be able to target looted funds and to stop corruption, and probably those who have hidden money for so long at home will try to run and go and make it clean money in the banks, or go and make it clean money in whatever way they want to. So we would like to have some more progress reports, some update, just like we have previously of people who have been arrested. We would like to know how much and what is the progress. Is this truly helping the federal government fight corruption, or it haven't started yet? Still on the Punch newspaper, government planning bank guarantees for Nigeria-Ethiopia deal, and you can read that on page 28. How delays costly court processes frustrate families, access to deceased saving, and that can be found on page 16 and 17. The big story on the Punch newspaper is on Muslim ticket. Friends criticizing me, lobbied for vice president slot. This is coming from Tinubu. Tinubu meets Khan, says he didn't Islamize his family, can't do such to Nigeria. Nigeria needs religiously neutral state, not a religious state. Association advises federal government. Next, president must assure a good balance between Muslim Christians, and this is coming from the association. And on the downside of the paper, surrender mandate if APC loses parties, tells Buhari, and you can read that on page 12. 11 cultists nabbed for terrorizing Lagos neighborhood, and you can read that on page 5. APC, are you disagree over bid to win Lagos, and you can read that on page 8. And we have a big picture story on the Punch newspaper. Officials of the Lagos State Task Force chairing a raid on commercial motorcycle operators known as Okada at Abade, Feba, Lagos on Wednesday. And we have the photos with the task force doing their job. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper. And I'll be moving to the Blueprint newspaper. And the big story is Atiku on presidency. Restructuring will start from my day one in office. Amendment bill ready. And the writer for that story promises private sector-driven economy for prosperity. Assures G5 governors family feud will be over soon. I won't run my government on religious sentiment, Tinubu is telling Khan. As Muslim, I am husband, father to Christian wife and children. I pick Shetima for his superior intellectual capacity. Khan seeks decentralized policing, equal rights, right to self-determination, determination and others. And you can read that on page 6. Still on the Blueprint newspaper, Senate in rowdy session over CBN's Naira redesign plan. You can read that on page 5. And domestic airlines rebuffed overture for ownership of Nigeria Air. This is coming from Sirika, and you can find that on page 25. DSS foils abduction of Ebonyi Labour Party senatorial candidate Okori, and page 5. And on the downside of the paper, NCC rejects Airtel Nigeria's $273.6 million bid for 5G network. Police take over Ekiti Assembly Complex. And that story is on insecurity. You can read more of that on page 16. Troops kill notorious terrorist Godo and Regiment. You can read that on page 9. Sokoto director jailed 7 years for job scam. And I hope many more others will be jailed for scamming people. We have a lot of these issues where people keep asking a Nigerian who is looking for a job to bring money. I mean, if I have 300,000, will I be asking you to give me a job? If I have ₦1,000,000, will I ask you to give me a job? Obviously, this person is coming to you to make ends meet. They don't have that kind of money. Stop scamming people for jobs. Stop asking them for a job. If for money to give them job, if you are at the position to truly help someone be employed, please go ahead and employ that person without making them go through hell just to be employed. Dangote Cement, 2 others lose 78.6 billion naira to forest scarcity in 9 months, and you can read that on page 22. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper. And at this point, I will be taking a short break and I will be back. Welcome back. It's still the Dailies here on Equa Television. And don't forget, we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. Please follow us and then drop your comments. Let us know what you have to say on all the stories and the current happenings in Nigeria. And I'm still on the papers, and the next paper I'll be taking is Nigerian News Direct. And the first story on Nigerian News Direct is on lotteries and gaming. Federal government lacks authority to issue licenses, regulate within federating states. And you can read that on page 2 of Nigerian News Direct. 100 days to 2023 election, no going back on BVA's INEC insists, and that's the big story here. You can read that on page 4. Muslim candidacy, I will not run my administration on basis of religion. This is coming from Tinubu, and it has been a story on all of our papers so far. And we hope he is saying the truth. And one way we will know he's been truthful about not it being a Muslim religious thing is that when he becomes the president of Nigeria, eventually, how he appoints his ministers and who he puts in key position will tell us truly if he is just for Nigeria or just for the Muslim religious biasness and all of that. So until you become president, before we will be sure if truly what you're saying is true about your intentions for Nigeria. Still on Nigerian News Direct, my restructuring agenda intact, we will be implemented from first day in office. This is coming from Atiku, and there are picture stories with Atiku at the center of the paper, and at the downside of the paper there is the one with Tinubu meeting with Khan and the speaker Gbajabiamila and others. And if you want to know more of those meetings and what all these presidential candidates have to say, get Nigerian News Direct for yourself. And the next paper I will be taking is this Nigeria. PDP reconciliation must be based on equity and fairness. This is coming from Wike. EFCC recovers $6 million from Bermuda change operators. Arrest currency speculators in Abuja. Senate in rowdy session over debate on new currency policy. And we still have the story which is on most of our paper. Drunk soldier kills army general in Lagos, and you can find that on page 14. I'm not aware of any agreement with ASU, says Adamu, education minister, and you can read that on page 5. Still on flood, reps accuse NEMA of lopsidedness in reaching out to affected states. Berates MDA's outgone for evading prop on ecological fund utilization. And we still have a picture story which has been on all of our paper, where we can see President Muhammadu Buhari watches as the national chairman, Nigerian Legion, Major General Abdul Malik Jibril retired, decorates Vice President Yemi Osibajo with the 2023 Armed Forces Remembrance Day emblem at the launch of the Appeal Fund during Federal Executive Council meeting at the Presidential Villa in Abuja yesterday. And that's all the news on this Nigeria. And I'll be moving to the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. The big story there, 99 days to election. CSO seeks sanction against underage voting, duplication in INEC register. The writer says development not surprising, airing staff will be sanctioned. INEC vows don't make Nigeria a problem for West Africa. Electoral Forum chair warns politicians. WACSI 2023 poll test for Nigerians' democratic strength. And I will keep saying INEC should stop whining but do the work. What is the penalty? Let's see people being punished for underage voting. And it is not a new thing. For many years, you go to polling units and yes, you will see underage citizens voting. It is not acceptable, and this should be taken seriously because it is a way of rigging the election. And whether we like it or not, it is tampering with the results for election. So something should be done. INEC should stop warning, but as I will keep saying, let them take action. What is the punishment for such crime? Something should be done so that Nigerians will know that INEC means business. And when you do something like that, there is a punishment for it. Still on the Guardian newspaper, Atiku faults APC lopsided appointment, says PDP will form government of national unity. Declining sperm count raises human extinction concern, and I believe that this is a medical report that we should take seriously, and you can read that on page 4. Government slay 9 family members in Plateau. 2 Nigerian athletes face 10 years jail terms in US for wire mail fraud, and you can read that on 63. And I would like to say, please, Nigerians, let's try our best. We are already on the radar for online frauding, as we know with the Yahoo and all of that. Please, let's try our best. You are athletes, and I believe that you already have a source of income. Work hard and make legit money. Let's stop spoiling our names. In as much as we have Nigerians out there making us proud, we saw the Brigadier General, we saw those who won the midterm elections as representatives. Yes, we have a lot of Nigerians making us proud, but it doesn't change the fact that we have those who are still dragging us to the mud. There is no need for that. You should be a Nigerian wherever you are, because this news will come as Nigerians doing this and doing that. So please, wherever you are, be a patriotic citizen and be the one who is putting Nigeria on the map and not dragging us to the mud. Still on the Guardian newspaper, federal government ASU face off. Government won't pay for service not rendered, minister insists. Finally, Tinubu meets Khan, allay same-faith ticket fare. Crisis looms in Ekiti House of Assembly 24 hours after election of new speaker. And that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper. And I'll be moving to the National Star newspaper. Crisis in NAS over CNA appointment. 3 officers battle for a just seat. Ethnicity at center of crisis. I'm here to receive appointment letter, says Akubeze, Senate clerk, and you can read that on page 22. And at the top side of the paper, Wike talks tough, says no reconciliation without equity and fairness. With BVA's impersonation is gone in election, INEC tells politicians. Lawyers sue Tinubu for drug trafficking, cert forgery, and age falsification. And you can read all of that allegations on page 4. PDP targets Lagos and 24 other states. IU is assuring us against the 2023 election. Call EFCC boss to order, Ohanaeze tells Buhari, and you can read that on page 4. And on the downside of the paper, Tinubu begs Khan for acceptance, says I'm not contesting on religious ground, and you can read that on page 4. And that's all the news on National Star. And the next paper is the Metrics newspaper. Atiku slams Buhari's lopsided appointment in security. And we've seen this story on most of our paper. And we are saying, Atiku, we are waiting to see how fair you will be when you become the president. That's the only way you can prove to us that you are doing the right thing. Let bygones be bygones. Wike apologizes to Ashemole for. And you can continue with that story in the Metric newspaper. And we have a little entertainment news here. Burna Boy and Tems make 65th Grammy Awards nomination list. This is a win for Nigeria, and we know that the Grammys is a very big award. For you to be nominated in the Grammy, it means that you are very good in your art. So we will say thumbs up to this, who are making us proud, and we hope that we continue to have more proud moments like this as Nigerians. Still on the Matrix newspaper, Bauer EFCC chairman says Naira redesign may crash dollar to 200 Naira. And the big story is still on Khan meeting Tinubu and present 11-point demands. And the writer following that story, creation of state police, rejection of open grazing, fair representation of military and security agencies, picking a Christian running mate would have been politically easier. And to be honest, I like the demands that the Khan are making. These are the things that concerns us as Nigeria. And if Tinubu will be fair when he becomes the president, he should be able to stick to these promises, as he has said that it is not a religious agenda for him, but for Nigeria. So if the Khan are saying that this is our concern and this is our problems, when you become the president, we hope that you look into it and solve that problem. Still on the Matrix newspaper, Obasanjo meets Yoruba elders, endorses devolution of powers. Amid heated debate, Senate gives CBN go-ahead on Naira redesign. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper. And the next paper I'll be taking is the Daily Sun newspaper. Southern Middle Belt Forum knocks Soludo over attack on Obi. And the big story, Atiku outlines 5 focus areas as Tinubu meets Khan. Drama as PDP members sweep venue of APC presidential campaign flag off in Jos, says it's symbolic action to rise state of ruling party aura. And you can read that on page 6. UK channels $100 million to women-owned businesses in Nigeria, and you can read that on page 25. And I would like to say thank you to the UK government for trying to empower women in Nigeria, as this empowerment will go a long way to creating job opportunities in the country. And we truly hope that this money gets into the right hand, and true business women who are leading will be able to get an even small business startup, because a lot of times these funds just stop for those who are already established. But there are a lot of small scale businesses that are struggling, and with a little help and boost, they can do better, they can create more employment, and they can grow the economy for the state where they are, and even Nigeria as a whole. So I hope that these funds doesn't stay at the top or only to big businesses, but even to small scale businesses. Still on the Daily Sun newspaper, tribunal compels INEC to produce Adeleke's certificate. Nomination form refuses to dismiss petition. And you can find that on page 29. We need united Nigeria. This is coming from Wike. And before you have a united Nigeria, you should first of all have a united party, because you are planning to be a ruling party. And if there's disagreement in your party, I wonder how you will run the country. So fix your party first, be a united party, and then that will go down to other Nigerians when you become the ruling party. Insists PDP reconciliation based on equity, fairness, and justice. I will leave a safer country next year. This is coming from Buhari, and approves 1.34 billion for military veterans. And at the downside of the paper, Tinubu, Omahi, APC governors unveil Ebonyi Governors Lodge in Abuja, and you can read that on page 3. And that's all the news on the Daily Sun newspaper. And I'll be moving to the Voice of Liberty. Price of maize rise, sorghum orders to jump in December 2022. This is a report, and I believe that it is to prepare the minds of Nigeria that food prices may not go down. Therefore, you should have a plan B, a plan A, a plan C on how to make sure you have enough food stored up in your houses, because it's going to be a stressful year. And I know these Nigerians won't want to hear that, because we are hopeful that the prices of food will go down. But I believe when experts and analysts bring out this report in some way, is to help us and like prepare your mind and say, you know what, this inflation is not about to go anytime soon. So do what you can to prepare for it. Tinubu reveals why he settled for Senator Shettima. Senate pledges support as lawmakers disagree on deadline. And the big story is on what Buhari said: I will leave behind a safer Nigeria. Buhari reassures, says no winner will be denied mandate irrespective of party. President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated he would leave a safer country behind when he hands over in 2023 during the emblem appeal launch for the 2023 Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration in Abuja. Biggest devaluation for Naira likely after February 2023 election, Bloomberg predicts. Atiku slams lopsided appointment of 17 heads of security agencies. Still on 2023 election, anyone underestimating Tinubu unwise. This is coming from Reno Omokri. And on the downside of the paper is still the pledge Atiku is making on restructuring, meets editors, and vows to upload press freedom. And that's all the news on the Voice of Liberty. And I'll be moving to an international paper, which is the Business Standard. And there is a story that says mobile subscribers, internet users fall by 3.1 million in September. And the big story here, payment complexity clouds Saudi urea import ahead of borrow season. LC opening house in 6 months. Chattogram Port gets new terminal after 15 years. BFIU suspend cash out for 230 MFA's account over Hundi transaction. Turkey happy to facilitate Bangladesh energy import. This is coming from Ambassador. And the last story here, boost trade capacity to tackle post LDC challenges. This is coming from stakeholders. And that's all the news on the Business Standard. And I'll be taking the Sporting Sun for our sport lovers. Osimhen nominated for Serie A Player of the Month. Kudos to you, Osimhen. FIFA orders NFA to pay Raw in dollars. And we have 2023 World Wrestling Championship. Nigerian wrestlers orders to pick Olympic tickets in Belgrade. And you can read that on page 7. And the big story on Sporting Sun, Ronaldo ruled out of Nigerian friendly. Super Eagles Portugal test might tonight. It draws or win against my country. This is coming from Pesero. Dual kicks off 7:45 p.m. and you can read that on page 6. Liverpool set to battle Arsenal for Chukwueze, and you can read that on page 6. Man City Thames Cruise offers him 13 to 14 million euros a year. Ten Hag wants Ronaldo banished from Man United. That might be harsh, but with what he said concerning him is only understood if everybody is angry and raging. You can read that on page 3. Still on the Sporting newspaper, World Cup countdown. I joke with Messi about beating him in the World Cup final. This is coming from Neymar, a former teammate of Messi at Barcelona, and I still current teammate at PSG. and Messi hints at possible retirement. You can read that on page 2. And we have David Beckham in talks over Ronaldo move to Inter Milan. Tyson Fury wants Anthony Joshua fight before retiring, and we hope he gets that fight, and we are looking forward to such a big fight. Chelsea reignites interest in 50 million Dembele, 50 million euros for Dembele, and you can see that in the Sporting Sun newspaper. And that's all the news on Sporting newspaper, and this is where I will be stopping for today. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Thank you for listening and watching this review. Don't forget, you can still join us every day on Facebook. Drop your comments and we will gladly read them here on the station. Goodbye for now and have a lovely day.